We are going to create this donut chart that shows new versus returning visitors on a website using GA4 data in Looker Studio. Seems like it should be easier than it is. It's not. Along the way, we're going to be using the mysterious COALESCE function. We're going to get into outer joins, and we're going to have to create various custom fields along the way. So let's get cracking. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put a couple of scorecards in and look at new users in comparison to returning users. All I'm going to do here is I'm connected to GA4 and I'm going to add new users. I'm going to copy this scorecard over. And then for this, what I'm going to do is just create a field. And my field is going to be returning users. And this will just be total users minus new users, because total users minus new users is returning users. So apply that. So now we see pretty small returning user percentage. Then if we go and try to create a pie chart, plunk this down here. Well, the way that a pie chart works is it's going to report on a metric with each segment of the pie being a different value for a dimension. And the problem in Looker Studio, this is true and with GA4 data generally, is we don't actually have a dimension to work with. We did in Universal Analytics, but we don't here. So that's what we're going to try to solve. And the way that we're going to try to solve it is by creating a blend. So if you're not familiar with blends, this will be fun. If you are familiar with blends, you'll see a few tricks that are going to be helpful in general when you're working with data. To create our blend, we're going to go to Resource, Manage Blends, and then I'm going to add a blend. Then what I'm going to do, I've got GA4 as the data source in my first table. And if you're not familiar with blends, what blends do is you can join two data sources. In this case, we're actually going to be joining GA4 to itself, and you'll see what I mean in a second. But in general, this is just a way that you can combine two sets of data. There's a lot to know about blends. We're going to cover a fairly specific example in this case, but I definitely, if you don't use blends, I do recommend learning about them because they're very powerful. So I'm going to get rid of event name here. I'm going to do something pretty weird. I'm going to add a dimension. I'm going to create a field here. I'm going to call this user type. And the value of this field is going to be a constant value. So I'm just going to call this new. I'm going to apply that. Then I'm going to add a metric, which is new users. Then I'm going to join another table, and this is going to be GA4 again. Then I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to say create a field, user type, and this one I'm going to give it the value of returning in quotes because this is a text value. Then for the metric here, I'm going to do what we did with the scorecard. I'm going to create a field, and I'm going to say returning users. And this will be total users minus new users. Apply that. Then the last thing we need to do is we need to tell Looker Studio how we want to combine these two data sets. There are various options for joining the data. I'm not going to go through all of them. The one that we're going to use is the full outer join. So if we click on that, we can see it describes that it returns all rows from the left tables and right table, whether they match or not. And that's what we want to do in this case is we actually want both data sets, the data set from the right and the data set from the left. Let's have a look at what exactly that join is going to do. So this is pretty much what my data looks like. I've got two tables. On the left, I have user type, and it has that constant value of new. And then it has a metric, new users. And on the right, the user type is returning, and it's got returning users. When I do a full outer join, what it's going to do is it's going to join the two data sets on a join condition. We're going to specify user type as the join condition, but in a full outer join, when the join value doesn't match, so in this case, we've got new on the left table and returning on the right table, so they never match. So what it'll do is it's going to add a row for each row in both the left and right tables. And because they have different metrics, there's going to be a column for new users and a column for returning users, but the new users column is going to be blank in the right table, and the returning users will be blank in the left table. So it'll look something like this. Because the only dimension in each table is user type, it automatically picked the user type dimension. So we're going to pick full outer. We're going to save that. And then I'm going to name this new, well, I'll name it GA4 new versus turning users. And I'm going to save that and close it. Okay, so that was a little weird. Now it's going to get a little weirder. What I'm going to do, so I want to use this as the data source for my pie chart here. So I'm going to pick that data source, GA4 new versus returning. Now, you'll notice that it created two different dimensions for user type. I honestly don't know exactly why it does that. I guess it's because I'm creating that dimension in each table. And so even though they have the same name, they don't match. But I'm going to do something really interesting and tricky here. I'm going to use the COALESCE function in Looker Studio. COALESCE is, I don't know, I think of it as the Winston Churchill of functions. It's most of the time you don't really want it, but when you need it, nothing else will do. So any history buffs will maybe know what I'm talking about. So let's look at what COALESCE does. So Looker Studio's definition of what COALESCE does as a function is it returns the first non-missing value found in a list of fields. So we're going to pass COALESCE the user type from the left table and the user type from the right table, and it's going to return a single coalesced value. So when the left table has a value of new, then it's going to return that. And because it has a value, it'll always return that. Now, there is no circumstance where both the left and right tables will have a value because we're joining on a field that never matches. On the left table, it's always new. On the right table, it's always returning. So in a row where the value in the left table is null and the value in the right table is returning, it's going to return returning. So here, we're going to take this dimension and we're going to coalesce those two values. So we're going to just call this user type again. And I'm going to put coalesce. And I'm going to give it the user type from the left and user type from the right. I'm going to apply that. And now so far, we only have one metric, so it's showing new users here. Now, maybe you're ahead of me, but I'm going to do some trickiness here. I'm going to create a field, and I'm going to call this just users. And what I'll do here is I'm going to coalesce new users and returning users. And I'm going to apply that. And there you have it. This is, I made it a donut chart in my example before. We can make this a little bit bigger. I'm not going to spend a lot of time formatting it. But so what's going on here is it took these two data sets and we're combining it into a single data set. So we're taking the two columns for user type and we're combining them into a single column using that coalesce formula for the dimension. But it is still true that anytime new users will have a 0 value when the user type is returning, and conversely, when the user type is new, returning users will have a 0 value. So it's going to line up the right values for this pie chart, because the idea of the pie chart is it's going to create a slice for returning users when user type is returning, and a slice for new users when the user type is new. I wish it weren't this hard. That's it. And I'll finish with just a few thoughts about the value of understanding new versus returning users. The new user metric, I think, is pretty unreliable, because what Google Analytics considers to be a user is what it can track, which is mostly based on cookies. So it's going to, like, you could appear as 3 different users if you visit a website on your phone, on your computer at work, on your computer at home. Then if you clear cookies, if you have some kind of ad blocker that maybe does it automatically for you. So there are a lot of reasons why Google Analytics overcounts users, and when it does so, tends to recognize a user as being new when that person may have been to a website before. The other thing that I want to mention about new users versus total users or returning users is, think about, like, what is the question you're trying to answer? I've had people sort of come to me and be like, well, a high new user percentage is bad, or a high new user percentage is good. And the thing is, it's fairly nuanced. If you're buying advertising with the goal of acquiring new customers, then a high new user percentage may be good. But on the other hand, people that visit more than once are showing more interest. So it's really rarely a clear-cut thing. Like, we do tend to see pretty high new user counts from sort of high funnel media, like display ads or something like that. And is that good or bad? It's really hard to say. So in and of itself, I don't think new users is a great number to pay attention to, but it is something a lot of people care about. So hope this helped, and thank you for watching.